So here's the thing. I'm Carly, 18, and my mom, Lisa, just completely flipped my world upside down. I'm her only daughter from her first marriage, and she's got 3 teenage boys with her new fiancé, Greg. They've been together for a little over a year now, and I figured I'd at least have a place in her upcoming wedding. I mean, it's my mom's wedding, right? I thought I'd be a part of it, or at least involved in some way. Well, I was wrong. It all started last week when I overheard my mom talking to one of her friends about her wedding plans. The wedding is set for December, the day before my birthday, no less. I had been excited because we talked about combining the wedding and my birthday into this big celebration. I thought it would be a fun weekend with family, a way to mark a new chapter for all of us. But while she was going on about dresses and decorations, I realized something strange. She hadn't mentioned me at all. So casually I asked, "Hey, when are we going to look for my dress for the wedding?" I wasn't expecting anything major, just trying to bring it up. But the look on her face? It was like I had just ruined her perfect day with a single question. She gave me this awkward smile and said, "We'll talk about it later." I let it go for the moment, but I couldn't shake the weird feeling I had. Later, when we sat down, I was ready to hear all about my dress and my role in the wedding. But what she told me was the last thing I expected. Greg thinks it would be better if his kids were more involved in the wedding, she said. I froze. His kids? What did that even mean? They're all teenage boys. And then, as if that wasn't bad enough, she dropped the real bomb. "You're not going to be in the wedding, Carly. Not going to be in the wedding. My own mother's wedding. And I'm not even invited to be a part of it?" I thought maybe I misheard her. But nope. She was dead serious. Apparently, Greg didn't want me there because, get this, I looked too much like my dad. Yeah, you heard that right. My face was the problem. Greg doesn't like the reminder of my mom's first marriage, so he decided it'd be easier if I just wasn't part of the wedding at all. I sat there, stunned, trying to process what she was telling me. I didn't know what to say. I thought maybe she was joking, but the look on her face said otherwise. And then, as if being excluded from the wedding wasn't bad enough, she casually mentioned that my birthday party was canceled too. They were going on their honeymoon the day after the wedding, so they didn't have time to celebrate my birthday. That's when I lost it. I yelled at her, "I'm sorry I don't look enough like you for you to love me." It came out harsh, but I was angry and hurt, and everything just bubbled over. She just stood there looking like I had slapped her, and before I knew it, Greg came storming into the room demanding that I leave. He said I was being disrespectful and had no right to talk to her like that. I packed my things and left. I couldn't stay there any longer after what happened. I went to my dad's house where I finally broke down and told him everything. He was furious. He wanted to call someone, CPS, the police, whoever, because he said they had no right to kick me out like that. But I begged him not to. I didn't want to drag my stepbrothers into this, and I didn't want things to escalate even more. Later that night, I texted my brothers to let them know what happened. Honestly, I wasn't expecting much from them since they've always been closer to our mom, but they surprised me. All 3 of them said they weren't going to the wedding either. That was a shock, but it made me feel a little less alone. At least they saw how messed up the situation was. Now, my mom's furious because her other kids are backing out of the wedding too, but I don't care. I've spent so long trying to be good enough for her, trying to make her happy, and I'm just done. It's hard to let go of that hope, though. Part of me still wants her to care, to change her mind, but deep down, I know she won't. Greg is her priority now, and I'm just not part of that picture anymore. I've got my dad and my brothers. I'm going to focus on them now. It's not like I need her approval anymore, right? After everything that went down with my mom, I thought things might calm down. You know, maybe she'd realize how wrong all of this was and reach out to fix it. I mean, she's still my mom, right? But no. Instead, I got total silence. Not a single word from her. No apology. No explanation. Nothing. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself, "It's fine, Carly. You don't need her. You've got your dad and your brothers. You'll be okay." But as the days passed, the silence started to get under my skin. How do you go from planning birthday parties and wedding stuff to completely ghosting your own kid? It messed with my head more than I wanted to admit. I spent a lot of time with my brothers during those days. They hadn't officially told my mom they weren't going to her wedding yet, but it was clear none of them were happy with how she treated me. I think they were waiting for her to make the first move, hoping she'd reach out and make things right. But nothing. It was like we were all stuck in this weird limbo, waiting for something to happen. One night, we were all hanging out, trying to avoid the elephant in the room. None of us were planning to go to the wedding, but no one wanted to say it out loud. My brother Josh finally asked, "Have you heard anything from Mom?" I just laughed. Nope. He gave me this sad, sympathetic look, but I could tell he was torn. I knew what he was thinking. At least she's still talking to us. And honestly, that hurt more than I thought it would. I wasn't mad at him or my other brothers for still having a relationship with her, but it felt like another reminder that I was the one who didn't fit into her new life. They were still part of her world, while I was being pushed further and further away. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. I don't even know why I started doing it, but once I did, I couldn't stop. There were pictures of me and my mom from before Greg came into the picture, photos from birthdays, family holidays, and random moments where we looked happy. There was one photo of us at my 10th birthday, me with a huge grin, my mom's arm around me, both of us smiling like we didn't have a care in the world. It felt like looking at a completely different life. When Greg came into the picture, I didn't think much of it at first. I mean, Mom had been single for a while, and I figured it was normal for her to be focused on her new relationship. But slowly, I started to fade into the background. Every conversation became about Greg, his kids, or their plans. And then, when they started having kids together, it was like I became invisible. The family shifted, and I was just a reminder of her old life. Looking back, I wonder if I should have said something sooner. Maybe if I had, things wouldn't have gotten this bad. Maybe I wouldn't be sitting here, staring at old pictures, wondering where everything went so wrong. But I never wanted to come off as bitter or jealous. I figured this was just how things went when your parent remarries. You take a step back and deal with it. I didn't expect to be completely cut out. A few days passed, and still, nothing from Mom. My brothers and I kept avoiding the wedding topic like it was a landmine we didn't want to trigger. Then one day, Josh called me out of the blue. His voice sounded off, and I immediately knew it was about Mom. "You quote, not going to believe this," he said, and I braced myself. Apparently, Mom had called him, asking if he was still coming to the wedding. When he told her he wasn't, she flipped out. She started crying, going on about how he was abandoning her, and how she couldn't believe her own son would choose his sister over her. She told him that this was supposed to be the happiest time of her life, and that I had ruined everything. Josh said he tried to explain that he wasn't choosing sides, but he couldn't support how she treated me. Of course, she didn't want to hear that. It didn't surprise me. This is what she always does, makes everything about her. Somehow, she's always the victim, and everyone else is the one to blame. Because her own kids didn't want to go to her wedding, it was my fault. I was the one who ruined it all. Typical. Josh sounded torn up about it. He didn't want to hurt her, but he also couldn't just sit by and pretend everything was fine. I told him I appreciated him standing up for me, but it sucked to know that our mom was still playing these mind games with us. It's like she can't help herself. She has to control the narrative, even if it means tearing the family apart. After that conversation, I felt even more confused. I hadn't heard from Mom directly, but now it seemed like she was reaching out to my brothers, trying to guilt them into going to the wedding. I started to wonder, was she ever going to try to talk to me? Or was I just completely written off? The silence was unbearable, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't be the one to break it. I wasn't going to beg for her attention anymore. I wasn't going to apologize for standing up for myself. If she wanted to cut me out of her life, then that was on her. In the end, I realized that my mom had made her choice. She chose Greg, his kids, and her new life over me. And as much as it hurt, I couldn't keep trying to fight for a place in her world. I had to focus on the people who actually cared about me, my dad, my brothers. I wasn't going to waste any more energy on someone who clearly didn't care about me. So, after Josh told my mom he wasn't going to the wedding, things got even weirder. It wasn't just about me anymore. Now, none of her kids were planning to go. And you know what? I didn't even feel bad about it. I mean, what did she expect after treating me like that? But I could tell the silence was getting to my brothers. They hadn't heard anything from her either, and it was starting to make them second-guess everything. Ben, my middle brother, was the one I was most worried about. He's always been the peacemaker, the one who tries to keep everything calm and avoid confrontation. I could tell he was struggling with the idea of not going to the wedding. He kept saying things like, maybe she's just stressed with all the planning, or what if this is just a misunderstanding? Like he was trying to justify her actions. I could see him wavering, but I didn't blame him. It's hard to stand up to someone when you've spent your whole life trying to keep them happy. Then one night, I got a call from Ben. He sounded off, like something was really bothering him. "Carly, we need to talk about Mom," he said. Great. More drama, I thought, but I tried to stay patient. Apparently, Mom had called him, pulling the same guilt trip she'd tried on Josh. She was telling him how she couldn't believe he would choose me over her, how this was supposed to be the happiest time in her life, and he was ruining it by siding with me. Ben sounded torn, and I could tell it was really messing with him. He didn't want to hurt her, but he also knew what she'd done to me was wrong. "I don't know what to do," he admitted. "I don't want to go, but she's making me feel like I'm betraying her." I took a deep breath before answering. "Ben, you don't owe her anything. She made her choice. You're not the bad guy for standing up for what's right. You can't let her guilt you into doing something you don't want to do, especially after how she treated me." Ben was quiet for a while, and I knew he was struggling with it. It wasn't easy for any of us to stand up to her, but Ben had always been the one who avoided confrontation at all costs. It hurt to hear him so conflicted, but I couldn't let him cave in to her manipulation. After that call, I started to realize just how deep the damage was. It wasn't just about me getting kicked out of the wedding. It was about how Mom had been controlling all of us for years. She'd always made us feel like we had to earn her love, like we weren't good enough unless we were doing exactly what she wanted. And now it was all coming to a head because she'd gone too far. A few days later, Josh called me again. This time he sounded different. Calmer, but more serious. "Carly, I've been thinking a lot about everything," he started. "About Mom, about how she's treated us, and I think I'm done." I didn't really know what he meant at first. "Done with what?" "With her," he said flatly. "I'm done letting her control my life." Hearing that from Josh was a shock. Out of all of us, he'd always been the closest to Mom. He used to defend her even when things were tough between her and me. So for him to say that, it hit hard. "I just can't keep pretending like this anymore," he continued. "This whole thing with the wedding, it's opened my eyes. She's never going to change, and I'm tired of trying to make things work when she's never going to put in the effort." I understood exactly how he felt. Once you see the truth about someone, you can't unsee it. Mom had always manipulated us and made us feel like we were the problem, but now we were all starting to realize it wasn't us, it was her, and she wasn't going to change, no matter how much we wanted her to. Josh and I talked for a long time that night. He opened up about all the little ways Mom had made him feel like he wasn't good enough, like he always had to prove himself to her, and how he'd just accepted it as normal. But now, with everything happening, he couldn't ignore it anymore. I quote, "We've been blind this whole time," he said. "And now that I see it, I don't know if I can ever look at her the same way again." That was the hardest part, realizing that the person you thought your mom was, the relationship you thought you had, wasn't real. It was built on control, on manipulation. And once you see that, there's no going back. The next few days were weirdly quiet. None of us talked to Mom, and it seemed like she was finally starting to realize that we weren't going to cave. But then, out of nowhere, she showed up at my dad's house. Yeah, she just showed up unannounced. I wasn't expecting it at all, and when I opened the door to see her standing there, I didn't know what to say. She looked tired, like the whole thing was wearing her down, but I wasn't about to feel sorry for her. Not after everything. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. I hesitated, but eventually stepped aside to let her in. We sat down in the living room. and there was this heavy silence between us. I wasn't sure what she wanted, but I was bracing myself for whatever was coming. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't realize how much this wedding was hurting you," she said. "I didn't mean for things to get this bad." I just sat there, quiet. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to believe her, to believe that she didn't mean for all of this to happen. But another part of me couldn't forget how she'd treated me. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was about years of feeling like I didn't matter to her. "I quote, we've been so focused on Greg and trying to make this wedding perfect," she continued. "I didn't stop to think about how it was affecting you." I kept waiting for her to say more, to apologize, to really try to make things right. But the longer we sat there, the more I realized this was just another attempt for her to smooth things over without really taking responsibility. "I want to make things right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to lose you. And that's when it hit me. She was scared. For the first time, she was actually scared of losing me. And while I appreciated that she finally seemed to care, I wasn't sure if it was enough. She'd made her choice, and I wasn't going to just forget everything that had happened because she suddenly decided to say the right words. When she left, I didn't feel better. I felt tired. Tired of trying. Tired of hoping for things to change when I knew deep down they probably never would. My mom might have realized she was losing us, but the damage was done. I didn't know if things could ever really be fixed. After that awkward talk with my mom, I thought maybe things would change. I hoped that she'd start making some real effort, Maybe she'd call, or at least send a text, to show that she was serious about fixing things. But as the days passed, nothing happened. It was like that conversation was just another attempt for her to feel better about herself without actually following through. The wedding was coming up fast, and my brothers and I hadn't heard a word from her. We were just stuck in this weird limbo. Josh had completely checked out at this point. He wasn't even mad anymore. He told me he was done letting her mess with his head. Ben, though, was still struggling. He kept going back and forth, trying to figure out if he should go to the wedding or not. I could see the guilt eating at him, but I told him the same thing I'd been saying all along. "Ben, you don't owe her anything. She made this mess, not you." Finally, the day of the wedding arrived, and the silence was louder than ever. None of us were going, and that was a decision we all stood by, even Ben, though I could see it was hard for him. We didn't talk much about it that day. There wasn't anything left to say. Instead, we hung out like it was any other Saturday, watching movies, eating junk food, and pretending like nothing was happening. But deep down, I couldn't help wondering how things were going at the wedding. Was she even thinking about us? Did she notice that none of her kids were there? That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I was still up, scrolling through old photos on my phone. I don't know why I kept doing it, but it was like I couldn't stop. There was one picture of me and my mom from when I was younger. We were at some family cookout, and I had my arm around her. We both looked so happy in that picture, but it didn't feel real anymore. That version of us felt like a different lifetime, like it was someone else entirely. It hit me hard that night, the realization that the mom I thought I had was never really who she was. I'd been holding on to this hope that things could go back to how they were, but that was just a fantasy. She'd made her choice a long time ago, and now I had to live with it. The truth is, sometimes people aren't who you need them to be, and no matter how much you want them to change, they don't. The next morning, I woke up to a text from a number I didn't recognize. My heart sank for a second, thinking it might be her reaching out after the wedding. But when I opened it, it was just a picture of my mom and Greg. They were all dressed up, smiling for the camera like everything was perfect. There was no message, just that one photo. And that's when it really hit me. She wasn't going to change. She'd moved on, built this new life with Greg, and I wasn't part of it. Not really. I sat there staring at that picture for a long time. I could feel this ache deep in my chest, a mix of anger, sadness, and something else I couldn't quite put into words. I wanted to be mad at her, to throw my phone across the room, but all I felt was tired. Tired of caring about someone who clearly didn't care enough about me. Tired of waiting for something that was never going to happen. I deleted the picture, blocked the number, and that was it. I decided it was time to let go. I couldn't keep holding on to the hope that she'd see me, that she'd realize how much she'd hurt me and try to make things right. That wasn't going to happen, and I had to accept that. I had to stop wasting my energy on someone who wasn't going to change, no matter how much I wanted her to. It wasn't easy, though. Even after I deleted that picture, the feelings didn't just disappear. But I knew I couldn't keep letting her control my life. I had people who cared about me, my dad, my brothers, and that was what mattered now. Josh, Ben, and I spent the next few weeks trying to get back to normal. It wasn't like we had some big heart-to-heart about what happened, but there was this unspoken understanding between us. We all knew what Mom had done, and we all knew that things would never be the same again. But we had each other, and that was enough. One day, Josh pulled me aside and said, "Carly, I know this stinks, but you're better off without all her drama. We all are. It's time we start focusing on ourselves and what makes us happy." He was right. We couldn't keep letting her mess with our heads. We couldn't keep bending over backward trying to make her happy when she clearly didn't care about doing the same for us. It was time to move on and start living our lives for ourselves, not for her. I still think about her sometimes, though. I wonder if she ever regrets what she did. If she ever sits in her new, perfect life with Greg and his kids and realizes that she lost her own children in the process. But I know I can't dwell on that anymore. I can't keep wondering what if. It's hard to walk away from someone you've spent your whole life trying to please, especially when that person is your mom. But at some point, you have to choose yourself. You have to stop trying to be good enough for someone who will never see your worth. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm choosing me. Maybe one day she'll reach out. Maybe one day she'll want to fix things. But until then, I'm done waiting. I'm done hoping for something that's never going to come. I've got my dad, my brothers, and a life ahead of me. And for now, that's more than enough.